Hello, everybody, it's your boy Jmulls here today to talk about the perfect prequel, Xenoblade 2, Torna, the Golden Country. So I've been listening to A Moment of Eternity essentially on repeat for a few days now, and I got to talk about Torna, the Golden Country. Ordinarily, I don't like prequels. When I already know how the story has to end or where it has to go, a lot of the tension and stakes for me drastically lessen, and I lose interest because I would prefer to know what comes after, where we just were. But there are two exceptions to this that stick out in my mind. The Star Wars prequels, look, I grew up on them, cut me some slack here, Vader's cool. And Torna, the Golden Country for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Full spoilers ahead. Xenoblade 2 has the perfect ending in my opinion, that does not need expanding on. It doesn't need a follow-up. It's great as is, and I was completely satisfied. But then we got Torna the Golden Country, starring Jin and Laura, and I thought, oh, okay, that's cool. Should be a bit, it should be a good bit of fun when it first came out. And I didn't expect for it to become one of my favorite games ever. Following Jin and Laura, the fate of Torna, Adam and Mithra, all the while, we get to see what the Golden Country was like 500 years before the events of Xenoblade 2. It all just does so much for the story that I didn't realize that it was needed. Well, not needed, it just made everything better. Because Xenoblade 2, Torna the Golden Country, understands what makes prequels effective, at least for me. And that is recontextualization and showing things that were not necessarily told in the base game. Developing the character of Fan Lenorn, or Hayes in this game, showing us who Adam was and what he was like, showing us what Torna was like at its peak, seeing how Bridget and Aegeon were like before Morag, and seeing Bridget's struggles for identity in this cycle of death and rebirth and memory loss, what that was like. And we also saw how imposing a fully suited up Malus could be. But the star of the show for me is the story of Laura and Jin. The star of the show is also A Moment of Eternity, and the star of the show is that freaking ending. When I point to good video game endings, Torna is up there and has a legit argument for one of the best video game endings that I've ever played. And I'm gonna have to talk a lot about the ending in this video because what makes this game work as a prequel is the ending. Most of the game has us building up our party, journeying across the Tornentine and Gormott for a little bit, doing various side quests, discovering the backstory of Laura and her mother, learning about the threat that Malus is, and taking in Torna's capital city. Most of it is just really good fun, and it's nice to get some of that backstory that was hinted at in 2. Seeing what the dynamic between Mithra and Adam was like helps add to a overall character arc and development from the beginning of Torna to the end of 2. It's a really solid game, with some great comedy and spectacular character moments and emotional resonating points. But like I said, the ending though. Look, a good ending can make everything that led up to it even better. And what Torna's ending does is a couple of key things, but woven together extraordinarily well. I could and probably will do a full video some point in the future on A Moment of Eternity and why it's such a good song. But honestly, it's all of Laura's feelings and what she thinks about her fate wrapped up in one song. It is the culmination of an entire character, her thoughts and emotions in one song. Xenoblade as a whole does such an excellent job of conveying story through the music, and A Moment of Eternity is arguably my favorite song in Xenoblade. It's at least neck and neck with One Last You. And the thing that I love about the ending, the thing I love about Torna so much, is that we never see Laura die. I thought we were going to when I first played this. It was such an obvious and easy way to elicit an emotional response from the audience. Oh, you know that character that dies that kickstarts Jin's descent into nihilism? Well, here's an entire game making you freaking love her and Jin together, and the dynamic between themselves and the rest of the party, because you know how it has to end in death, and knowing that will make it all the more sad when we show you her die again, but they don't do that. It is such a simple thing in hindsight, but it is such an effective tool for storytelling. Because honestly, some of the best story moments are the simple ones, are the simple choices of either showing something or not showing something, and not showing her die again when we already had that multiple times in 2 was perfect in my opinion, because it makes the game lead into 2 even better. They know that Laura has to die, that Mithra has to destroy Torna and create Pyra and be locked away. You know Jin has to become a flesh eater. You know all of that has to happen. And they never show you Laura dying or Jin becoming a flesh eater. They keep that for the base game. Because in my opinion, the optimal way to experience Xenoblade 2 is to play Xenoblade 2, go back to play Xenoblade 2 Torna, and then do a new game plus of Xenoblade 2. Because Torna recontextualizes so many scenes, and we'll get to that. But you want to know what they do show you? They don't show her dying. But what they do show you is the moment right before she dies. Right before the forces of Indol lay waste to everyone and Laura gets hit in the decimation. Because you know what has to follow. They show you they show you what leads up to it. And lets your mind remember the rest. And hits so much harder, in my opinion, because of that. Because they rely on the fact that this is a prequel, so they don't have to show you stuff that they already showed you in the base game. They can let your mind fill in the blank, or connect the dots. And they fade to Jin's monologue, and Jin's final monologue is some of my favorite dialogue that I've ever heard. It's the perfect encapsulation of his character, of his motivations. He doesn't wish for forever, but just a moment of eternity, get it? To see her smile again. We don't see a gradual shift in the character of Jin. That's not what Torna's all about. It's not about a slow burn or a slow decline into his nihilism, into his motivations for 2. We know the moment of his greatest loss happens, and it happens in a moment. And all the buildup that we just got makes him way more understandable. We can sympathize with his grief. Obviously, we don't agree with his course of action in 2, but we can see how he went from point A to point B. Torna doesn't fill in the blanks like a lot of prequels do, where they try and shove extra information in, or they leave things out in the base game to keep it as a question mark. Torna doesn't do that. It doesn't just fill in the blanks. It recontextualizes. It adds more depth and character to the cast. It adds to the backstory. And what it does so well is show the things that we were told in the base game. We were told that Jin hated fighting. We were told he loved Laura. But we rarely ever got to see it. We didn't get to see Mithra destroy Torna. We just saw the emotional aftermath of it. But we didn't get to see her emotional collapse. We understood that Jin thought he was doing Hayes a service by killing her in Chapter 5. So while we understood all of that, and more in the base game, we are shown it in Torna. Why Jin would think killing Hayes was the right thing to do. It recontextualizes all of Chapter 5 and Jin's thought process, and lets us into what he was probably thinking throughout so many different scenes in Xenoblade 2. We get more development, more context. Blanks aren't filled, but what makes prequels work, in my opinion, is that recontextualization. It is so critical and important, because it makes these characters and their stories more endearing, more interesting. Expanding and showing character backstory makes their overall narrative arc more engaging and emotionally resonant, because the things that we were told were shown here. We saw Mithra's descent, Bridget's concerns about being reborn, Adam's struggles between being the Aegis driver and the Prince of Torna. Those stories hit all the more because we are shown that moment, and all the while we didn't want the inevitable to happen, but we all knew the ending, because it played on the fact that we knew, because Torna the Golden Country wasn't designed to be a one-off experience, it was designed to be a prequel. It was designed for things that you knew to lead you along. Like, it understood that you knew where this story had to go, where the fates of all these characters had to end up at. You knew the destination, but now it showed you the journey. We didn't want Laura to die, we didn't want Torna to fall, but it did, and despite how good the good was, we knew what was to come. And honestly, that's kind of the point. It's kind of poetic even, because all those moments live on in that moment, in Torna, the Golden Country, in a moment of eternity. Told you the music was great at conveying the story, didn't I? Because that's what makes prequels work. That recontextualization and showing what was told in the original. Because we become more emotionally resonant, we become more engaged in a product, in a story, when we are shown things, rather than when we are just told a list of facts that happened. When we see the characters interact with each other, when we see the consequences of their own actions, when we saw Mithra react to the corpses of all that died because she let her powers consume her, we saw her break. We understood that happened in Xenoblade 2, but we saw it happen. We saw Jin break emotionally, and we saw where he ended up. And that's why Torna the Golden Country was so compelling to me. And that's why it's, in my opinion, the perfect prequel. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment down below with your thoughts on Xenoblade 2 Torna the Golden Country. Also, leave a comment with your thoughts on A Moment of Eternity, the song as well. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.